Stop scrolling. Not because an algorithm suggested this to you, and not because you stumbled here by some random chain of digital chance. Stop scrolling because something older than the internet, something older than every system human hands have ever built, pressed pause on everything else in your life long enough to make sure this message found you. You need to understand that right now. Before one more word is spoken, before one more thought is offered, you need to settle into the reality that you are not here accidentally. You are here because you were chosen to be here. And the fact that you cannot fully explain why you kept watching, why you did not swipe away, why something in your chest said wait, is itself the first piece of evidence. You are not like the rest. That is not flattery. That is a fact that your own life has been quietly proving to you for years, even when you did not have the language to describe it. There is something about you that has never quite fit the mold, never quite settled into the ordinary rhythm that everyone else around you seemed so comfortable living inside of. You have stood in rooms full of people and felt completely alone. You have sat in conversations that were loud and full of laughter and still felt a silence inside of you that no amount of noise could fill. You have looked at your life sometimes and felt certain that something enormous was supposed to happen, that something was building, that the story was not over, that the best chapter had not been written yet. And then the days would pass and the certainty would flicker, and you would wonder whether you had imagined it all. You did not imagine it. What you have been feeling is not wishful thinking. It is a frequency, a divine signal, a marker that has been on your life since before you drew your first breath. The chosen ones do not choose themselves. They are called, they are marked, and then they are led, often through confusion, often through wilderness, often through the kind of seasons that make no logical sense, until they arrive at the exact moment that was always waiting for them. This moment, right here, right now. There are signs that only chosen ones carry. And if you are honest with yourself, you will recognize more than one of them in your own experience. The first sign is that your dreams have always been unusually vivid, unusually layered, unusually full of meaning that your waking mind struggles to translate. You do not just dream, you receive. Sometimes the images stay with you for days, sometimes for years, sometimes forever, sitting in the back of your memory like a message you were told to hold, until the right moment to open it arrived. If your dreams have felt different from other people's dreams, that is not coincidence. That is a signal. The second sign is that you have felt an inexplicable pull towards something you cannot name. A sense of destiny that does not come with a map. A knowing that sits underneath every ordinary thing you do, reminding you that there is more, that you were built for more, that the life you are living on the surface is not the full picture of what you were sent here to do. Some days that pull feels like fire. Other days it feels like pressure. But it never fully disappears because it is not a feeling, it is a calling. The third sign is that you feel things more deeply than the people around you. Not in a way that makes you dramatic or unstable, but in a way that makes you perceptive, empathetic, and spiritually awake to things others walk past without noticing. You pick up on what is unspoken in a room. You sense when something is wrong before anyone says a word. You grieve things deeply, and you love things deeply. And you carry the weight of both with a quiet strength that most people do not see until they need it. That depth is not a flaw. It is a gift. It is the mark of someone who was designed to go into places of darkness and carry light without being consumed. The fourth sign is that your path has been anything but straightforward. While others seem to move in clean, predictable lines toward careers and stability, and all the things the world calls success, Your road has bent and broken and rerouted more times than you can count. You have faced delays that made no sense. You have experienced losses that felt unfair. You have watched doors close that you were certain were meant to open. And through all of it, something inside you refused to give up. Refused to let go of the belief that the story was not finished, that the setbacks were not the conclusion. That refusal was not stubbornness. It was faith, even when you did not call it that. The fifth sign is the one that brought you here today. You have been feeling it recently. A heightened awareness, a restlessness in your spirit, a sense that something is shifting, that something is about to break open, that a message is coming, and you need to be still enough to receive it. That feeling is not anxiety, that is spiritual perception activating. Heaven does not send restlessness without purpose. When your soul grows unsettled in that particular way, it is because something is. Approaching that requires you to be awake, alert, and ready. God has been trying to reach you, not once, not twice, but 4 distinct times, through 4 different channels, using 4 different forms of signal. And each time you were close to receiving the full message, something pulled you back, or life got loud again, or the weight of your own doubt became heavier than the promise you were holding. But here is what you need to know about the God who chose you. He does not abandon the mission. He does not rescind the call. He does not look at the one. He marked and decide the event is no longer worth it. He keeps coming. He keeps speaking. He keeps sending the signal, refining it, adjusting the frequency, making it louder, making it undeniable, until the moment arrives when you are finally positioned to receive it completely. And this, beloved chosen one, is that moment. This is the 5th time, and this one is not a whisper. This one is not a gentle nudge or a coincidence you can explain away over coffee. This one is the unskippable encounter, the divine appointment that has been scheduled since, before you had a name, the moment heaven has been building toward with every single twist of your journey. The 4 times before this were not failures. They were preparation. They were the training ground, the stretching season, the long corridor that leads to the door that is standing open right now in front of you. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to disappear into the background of someone else's story. You were never meant to shrink yourself down to a size that made other people comfortable. The discomfort you have caused simply by being fully yourself, the way certain people have pulled away from you without explanation, the way certain rooms never quite felt like they were built for you, none of that is rejection, that is refinement. God does not place his chosen ones in environments designed for comfort. He places them in environments designed for formation. And every place that did not fit you was shaping you for the place that will. Right now, if you feel something moving in you, if there is a warmth or a weight or a quiet trembling in your spirit as these words land, I want you to honor that. Do not dismiss it. Do not rationalize it away. That is the response of the chosen one encountering divine truth. That is your spirit recognizing a frequency it has been waiting to hear again. Let it move. Let it land. Let it do what it came to do. And if you are watching this and you feel seen in a way you cannot explain, if something in you is rising up in recognition, I want to invite you to declare it. Type the number 888 in the comments right now. 888 is the number of new beginnings, of resurrection, of the divine overflow that God releases over those he has set apart for something greater. When you type it, you are not just engaging with a video. You are making a declaration in the spiritual realm that you are awake, that you are receiving, and that you are ready for what comes next. Type 888 and watch what shifts in the atmosphere around you. Because this is not a video, this is a visitation. And the 4 times God spoke before this moment were not wasted. They were working. They were laying the groundwork, building the foundation, softening the ground of your heart, pruning the branches that could not carry the weight of what is coming. And now, in this 5th encounter, everything that was prepared in the previous 4 comes together. The confusion becomes clarity. The wilderness becomes a platform. The silence becomes a word. And the word becomes a life. And the life becomes a testimony that will outlast everything that tried to stop you. You were chosen. You were called. You were preserved through every season that should have broken you but did not. And you are here now, not because the algorithm is smart, and not because you had good timing, but because the God who set your life in motion before the foundations of the earth were laid, made sure that this 5th message, this final and unskippable encounter, would find you in the exact moment you needed it most. Stay with this. Every word that follows is for you. Every section that comes after this one is a deeper layer of the same signal, each one opening something in you that has been waiting to be unlocked. You are not a spectator in this moment. You are the reason this message exists. And everything you have carried, everything you have lost, everything you have waited for, is about to make a different kind of sense. The first time God spoke to you, you called it a coincidence, but you are about to find out what it really was. The first time God spoke, you called it a coincidence. You remember it, even if you have never given it that name. It was the moment that felt too precise to be random, too perfectly timed to be explained by logic alone. And yet your mind reached for the nearest rational explanation and held on to it tightly, because accepting the alternative would have required something from you that you were not sure you were ready to give. It would have required you to believe that you were being watched, being guided, being pursued by something infinitely larger than yourself. And that kind of belief changes a person. It rearranges priorities. It reorders the architecture of an entire life. And so, you called it coincidence, you called it luck, you called it good timing, and you moved on. But the signal did not stop. The voice did not go quiet. It simply waited. Moses knew this experience better than almost anyone who has ever walked the earth. Here was a man who was born into impossible circumstances, delivered from death as an infant, raised inside the house of the very empire that had enslaved his people, and yet, never fully belonging to either world. He wore the robes of Egyptian royalty, but carried in his blood the identity of a Hebrew slave. And that tension, that in-between space where he never quite fit on either side, was not a mistake in his story. It was the making of him. It was the precise condition God required to shape the vessel that would carry one of the greatest assignments in all of human history. Moses did not choose his contradiction. He was born into it. And if you have ever felt like you belong to 2 worlds and are fully welcomed by neither, you are walking in a lineage far older and far more purposeful than you may have realized. But here is where the story of Moses intersects with the signal you dismissed. Long before the burning bush, long before the parting of the Red Sea, long before any of the miracles that would make his name immortal, God was already speaking to Moses through the architecture of his life. Every detail of his early years was a divine transmission, a carefully constructed message written not in words, but in events, in placements, in the specific people who entered and exited his world at exactly the right time. His mother placing him in a basket on the river was not desperation. It was obedience to a signal she received before she had a name for it. Pharaoh's daughter drawing him out of the water was not random compassion. It was a divine appointment dressed in the clothes of an ordinary moment. The palace education, the Hebrew heritage, the dual identity, none of it was accidental. All of it was the first time God spoke, laying the groundwork for an assignment that would not be fully revealed for decades. And Moses missed it. Not because he was unintelligent, not because he lacked spiritual capacity, but because the first time God speaks to a chosen one, the message almost always arrives in a form the chosen one does not recognize as divine. It looks like circumstances. It looks like coincidence. It looks like the ordinary texture of a life being lived without particular awareness of who is orchestrating the details. Moses grew up in the palace and saw his privilege as simply his reality, not as the strategic placement of a God who needed a deliverer to have access to the language, the customs, and the confidence of the very empire that would one day need to be confronted. He did not see the first signal for what it was, and neither did you. Think about the moment in your own life that you now look back on and recognize as something more than chance. The job you lost that felt like devastation but redirected you towards something that actually mattered. The relationship that ended in pain but removed you from a path that would have kept you small. The door that closed so firmly that you stopped pushing against it, only to discover later that behind it was nothing meant for you, while behind you, the door that was actually yours had quietly swung open. These were not accidents. These were the first time God spoke, in the language of your circumstances, in the dialect of your specific life, sending a signal through the very things you interpreted as loss, delay, and redirection. The reason chosen ones so often miss the first signal is not spiritual failure. It is the natural response of a mind that has been trained by the world to look for logic as the highest form of evidence. The world teaches you to trust what you can measure, what you can explain, what you can reproduce in a controlled environment. And the first divine signal never arrives in a controlled environment. It arrives in the real life, in the middle of uncertainty, in the space between what you hoped for and what actually happened. It requires a different kind of perception to receive it, a kind of seeing that goes deeper than the surface of events, a kind of listening that hears beneath the noise of explanation. Moses eventually developed that perception, but not before a crisis forced it open. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and something in him, some deep and unresolved current of identity and calling, rose up with a force he could not contain. He acted, and in acting he revealed something about himself that he had not fully understood, that his identity was not Egyptian, that his allegiance was not to the empire, that the assignment on his life was bigger than the comfort of the palace. He thought he was solving a problem. He was actually taking the first step toward his calling. But because he moved ahead of God's timing, because he tried to fulfill in his own strength what was meant to be fulfilled in divine partnership, the action brought consequences rather than celebration, and Moses fled into the wilderness as a fugitive. If you have ever moved too fast on something that felt like calling, if you have ever grabbed hold of a door God was opening and pushed it so hard that it swung back and hit you, if you have ever confused your passion for your assignment and paid a price for the confusion, you are not disqualified. You are in very good company. The wilderness that Moses ran into was not the end of his story. It was the classroom. It was the place where the first signal, the one he missed in the palace, the one he mishandled at the moment of crisis, would be allowed to mature inside him until he was ready to receive it in its fullness. And the wilderness does something to a chosen one that comfort never can. It strips away every false identity. It removes every crutch that was holding you upright without God's strength. It takes you down to the core of who you actually are when every external definition is gone. when the title is removed, when the reputation is in ruins, when the only thing left is you and the God who called you. Moses went from prince to shepherd in what must have felt like a single catastrophic fall. And in that fall, in that wilderness, in that long season of seemingly ordinary days, tending someone else's flock on the backside of a desert, God was doing the deepest work of all. He was teaching Moses to be still. He was teaching him to listen. He was calibrating the frequency of Moses, quieting the noise of palace ambition and survival fear, tuning the instrument of this chosen one until he was finally sensitive enough to hear what had been being said all along. This is the word of God spoken through the prophet Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 31. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. That promise was written for people in the wilderness, not for people in the palace. Not for people in the moment of triumph. For people in the long, quiet, confusing season when the calling feels distant and the evidence of purpose feels thin. Because it is in that season that the deepest renewal happens, not the renewal of circumstance, but the renewal of the person, the rebuilding of the chosen one from the inside out, in the place no audience ever sees. You have had a wilderness. You may be in one right now. And if you are, I want you to hear this clearly. The length of your wilderness is not a measure of how far you have fallen from God's plan. It is a measure of how significant the assignment waiting on the other side of it truly is. Small assignments require short preparation. World-changing ones require the kind of deep, cellular transformation that only the wilderness can produce. Moses spent 40 years in that desert, 40 years of ordinary mornings and unremarkable evenings, of tending flocks and watching sunsets, of living a life that looked nothing like the destiny that had been whispered over him in the palace. And not one of those days was wasted. Every single one of them was doing something in him that could not be done any other way. So when you look back at the years that felt lost, the seasons that felt wasted, the chapters of your life that seemed to go nowhere and produce nothing you could point to with pride, I want you to reframe them. Not through denial, not through the spiritual bypass of pretending pain was not pain, but through the deeper truth that nothing in a chosen one's life is ever truly wasted. Every hard season was a school. Every loss was a curriculum. Every moment of confusion was a class in a course. That was preparing you for an assignment too large, to be entrusted to someone who had never been broken open. The first time God spoke to you, you called it coincidence. But now, standing here with a little more of the story visible, you can begin to see it differently. You can begin to trace the thread that runs through the seemingly unconnected events of your life and recognize that the thread was never random. It was intentional. It was purposeful. It was the first movement of a symphony that is still being written. And you, chosen one, are not merely an audience member. You are the instrument through which the music is being played. Moses would not have been Moses without the palace. He would not have been Moses without the crisis. He would not have been Moses without the wilderness. And you will not be who you were created to be without every single chapter your life has already written, including the ones you are most tempted to wish away. The first signal was not a mistake. It was a beginning, and where beginnings come from, more always follows. The wilderness never announces when it is ending. That is one of the cruelest and most merciful things about it at the same time. Cruel, because the person inside it has no visible horizon to fix their eyes on, no countdown, no marker on the wall that says you are almost through. Hold on just a little longer. Merciful, because if the chosen one knew exactly how much longer the season would last, the temptation to coast through the final stretch rather than continuing to be formed by it would be almost impossible to resist. God conceals the exit not to torment you, but to protect the process. The moment you know the wilderness is almost over is the moment you stop allowing it to finish its work in you. And the work is never finished until it is finished completely. Moses did not know he was 40 years into a 40-year preparation when the morning arrived that would change everything. He was doing what he had done on hundreds of mornings before that one, leading the flock of his father-in-law Jethro through familiar terrain, moving toward Horeb, the mountain of God, not because he had a spiritual agenda for the day, but because that was where the grazing was. He was not fasting. He was not in a posture of intense prayer. He was not performing any ritual that would, by human logic, qualify him to receive a supernatural encounter. He was simply present. He was simply going about the ordinary business of an ordinary day. And that is exactly when God chose to speak for the second time. The bush that burned but was not consumed. Think about what Moses must have felt in that moment. Not the theological weight of it, not the historical significance of it, but the raw human experience of a man who had spent 40 years in the desert, seeing a fire that behaved in a way fire had never behaved before. Something in him said, "Look closer." Something in him said, "This is different." And instead of rationalizing it, instead of deciding he was tired or that the desert sun was playing tricks on his perception, he turned aside to see. That turning aside was the moment everything changed. Not the fire itself, the response to the fire, the willingness to stop, to look, to take the signal seriously rather than explain it away. God was watching for exactly that. And when he saw that Moses turned aside to see, he spoke. This is the pattern of the second signal in a chosen one's life. The first signal is embedded in the architecture of your circumstances, woven into the events and redirections and apparent coincidences of your story. The second signal is more direct, more undeniable, more personal, but it still requires the same thing the first one did. It requires you to turn aside. It requires you to stop the forward momentum of your ordinary day and give your full attention to something that does not fit the pattern of what you have come to expect. The burning bush of your life may not look like a literal fire in a desert. It may look like a message that arrives at 3 in the morning that you cannot shake. It may look like a conversation that stops you cold because something in it speaks directly to the thing you have been carrying in private for years. It may look like this right now, this very moment, where something in you keeps saying, "Stay, keep listening. This is not ordinary." And God does not speak from the burning bush to give Moses information. He speaks to give Moses identity. Before he issues a single instruction, before he outlines the assignment, before he says anything about Egypt or Pharaoh or the Hebrew people, God speaks the most important words Moses has ever heard. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." He begins with lineage. He begins with belonging. He begins by telling Moses who he is connected to, whose story he is part of, what covenant has been running through his bloodline long before Moses ever took his first breath. Because a chosen one cannot walk into their assignment till they know whose they are. Identity must come before instruction. Belonging must be established before the mission can be received. You have perhaps been waiting for God to give you the instruction, waiting for the specific direction, the clear word, the detailed roadmap that tells you exactly what to do and when and how. But before the instruction comes the identity. Before the mission comes the belonging. Before God can send you anywhere, He must first make sure you know where you come from, who chose you, what covenant covers you, and what authority backs every step you take. The burning bush was not primarily a spectacle. It was a declaration of identity. And the assignment that followed was only possible because the identity was established first. Moses heard the identity and immediately felt the weight of inadequacy. "Who am I," he said, "that I should go to Pharaoh?" And this too is the mark of the genuine chosen one. Not arrogance, not a swaggering confidence in personal ability, a trembling awareness of the gap between who they feel themselves to be and what the assignment appears to require. The imposter does not ask, "Who am I?" The imposter steps forward without hesitation, full of self-assurance, untroubled by the enormity of what is being asked. The truly chosen one feels the gap acutely. They feel the inadequacy in their bones. They look at the assignment and then look at themselves, and the distance between the two seems impossible to cross. But God's answer to Moses is the same answer He gives to every chosen one who stands in that trembling place of feeling unqualified. He does not list Moses' credentials. He does not remind him of his palace education or his survival story or the strategic advantages of his upbringing. He says simply, "I will be with you." That is the answer. Not a catalog of your qualifications, not a reassurance that you are more capable than you think. Just the presence of God, the promise that wherever you go and whatever you face, you will not be going alone. You will not be facing it alone. And the one who is with you is the one who created the universe with a word. The book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5, carries this truth in a form that reaches across time and lands directly in the center of your story. "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." This was spoken to Jeremiah, but the principle belongs to every chosen one. You were known before you were formed. You were set apart before you were born. The assignment did not begin when you became aware of it. It was written into the fabric of your existence before your existence had a name. The burning bush moment in your life, the second time God spoke, was not the beginning of your calling. It was the revelation of a calling that was already ancient by the time it became visible to you. Moses stood at the bush and pushed back. He raised objection after objection, and this too is important, because God did not respond to Moses' objections with frustration or with withdrawal. He responded with provision. For every obstacle Moses named, God produced an answer. A staff that became a snake, a hand made leprous and then restored. The promise of a brother who would speak when Moses felt his words were insufficient. God does not call the equipped. He equips the called. And every objection you have raised in the secret places of your own heart, every time you have said, "I am not smart enough, not strong enough, not healed enough, not prepared enough," God has already prepared the answer. You simply have not seen it yet, because you have not yet stepped forward far enough to receive it. The second time God spoke to you was the moment that felt undeniable. The moment you could not fully explain away no matter how hard your logical mind tried. The moment that left a mark, that changed the temperature of the air, that made you sit very still for a long time afterward, because something had shifted and you knew it, even if you could not articulate what. That moment was your burning bush. That was God calling you by name, not Moses, not by the name the world gave you, but by the name Heaven has always known you by, the name that corresponds to your assignment, the name that is written in a place no earthly record can touch. And just as Moses stood barefoot on holy ground, you too have been standing on holy ground more often than you realized. The places that humbled you, the moments that brought you to your knees, the seasons that stripped every layer of self-sufficiency and left you raw and open and desperately in need of something beyond your own strength, those were not unholy places. Those were the places where the ground was most sacred, where the presence was most concentrated, where the voice was speaking, most clearly if you were quiet enough to hear it. The second signal was not a warning, it was a welcome. It was God saying, I see you, I know you, I chose you, and I am not done with you. The assignment is still on, the covenant is still intact, the purpose is still burning, and it is burning without being consumed, which means it cannot be extinguished by your failures, your doubts, your delays, or your detours. It burns on, it burns now, and it will keep burning until you turn aside, take off your shoes, and say with everything that you are, here I am. Moses said yes eventually. Not all at once, not without struggle, not without resistance and question, and the very human desire to find someone else more qualified to carry the weight of such an enormous thing. But eventually, the yes came, and when it came, it did not come from a place of confidence in himself. It came from a place of confidence in the one who was sending him. That is the only yes that ever works for a chosen one. Not the yes of personal courage, though that matters. Not the yes of natural ability, though that plays a role. But the yes of surrender, the yes of someone who has looked at the gap between who they are and what they are being asked to do, and decided that the God who is asking is bigger than the gap. Your yes is coming. If it has not fully arrived yet, it is closer than it has ever been. Every section of this message is designed to bring you one step closer to the moment where you stop running the calculations of your own inadequacy and start resting in the sufficiency of the one who called you. Moses turned aside to see the bush, and his entire world changed. You have already turned aside. You are already here. You are already seeing, and the God who spoke from the fire is speaking still. Something is happening in you right now that goes deeper than inspiration. The story of Moses, the burning bush, the voice that called a broken and reluctant man out of 40 years of wilderness and sent him to confront the most powerful empire on earth. That story is not ancient history dressed up in religious language. It is a mirror. It is a map. And if you have been feeling the weight of it settle into your chest as these words have moved through you, that is not coincidence, and it is not emotion alone. That is recognition. That is the part of you that knows it has heard this frequency before, not in this lifetime, not in any classroom or church service or self-help seminar, but in the deepest register of your spirit, a place that was tuned to this signal before you were born. And that word, frequency, is where something remarkable happens. Because the spiritual reality that chosen ones carry, that particular quality of awareness, that heightened sensitivity, that inexplicable pull toward purpose that you have been feeling your entire life, it turns out that science has been quietly catching up to what heaven has always known. Researchers studying the human brain at the highest levels, at institutions like MIT, and through collaborations with NASA, have discovered something that should stop you in your tracks. Chosen ones carry a specific neurological frequency. Scientists call it gamma. And the presence of that frequency in a human brain is directly associated with the qualities that have marked you as different your entire life. Heightened perception, accelerated learning, deep creative insight, the ability to access what researchers describe as flow states. Those extraordinary moments when everything aligns and you operate at a level that surprises even yourself. But here is where the story deepens. There is another frequency, one that sits beneath gamma and feeds it, one that children access naturally and effortlessly, one that your brain produced in abundance when you were young and spiritually unguarded and still fully alive to wonder. It is called theta, and it operates between 4 and 8 cycles per second. A slow, deep, luminous band of brain activity associated with creativity, intuition, deep learning, and the kind of meditative openness that allows the extraordinary to enter through the ordinary. Theta is the frequency of the burning bush moment. It is the neurological state in which the walls between the seen and the unseen grow thin, in which insight arrives not through effort but through receptivity, in which the chosen one is most fully available to the signal that heaven is always broadcasting. The problem is that somewhere between childhood and adulthood, between wonder and worry, between the open field of a young spirit and the fenced yard of a life managed by obligation and survival, most people lose consistent access to theta. The noise of the world drowns it out. The demands of daily life crowd it into the margins. The accumulated weight of stress and disappointment and the relentless pressure to perform builds a kind of neurological static that makes it harder and harder to access the deep frequency where your truest self lives and where your connection to the divine is most clear and most felt. Dr. James Rivers understood this problem better than almost anyone alive. A neuroscientist with more than 30 years of dedicated research into the relationship between brainwave activity and human potential, trained at MIT and connected to research programs that include collaborations with NASA scientists studying peak cognitive performance. Dr. Rivers spent the better part of his career asking one specific question. Why do some people seem to have consistent access to extraordinary mental clarity, creativity, and insight, while others, equally intelligent and equally motivated, struggle to access those states at all? The answer he arrived at, after thousands of hours of research and experimentation, was both breathtakingly simple and profoundly significant. It was not about intelligence. It was not about discipline or willpower or any of the qualities the world typically associates with exceptional performance. It was about frequency. It was about the brain's ability to access and sustain the specific brainwave states, theta and gamma, that make everything else possible. And from that discovery came something extraordinary, a precisely engineered audio experience, 7 minutes in length, built on the principles of brainwave entrainment, the scientifically documented phenomenon by which the brain naturally synchronizes its own electrical activity to the frequency of an external auditory signal. Using a carefully calibrated combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones, frequencies calculated to guide the brain gently and precisely into theta and gamma states, Dr. Rivers created what became known as the Genius Wave, not a meditation app, not a motivational recording. A neurological tool grounded in decades of peer-reviewed research, designed to do in 7 minutes what most people spend years trying to achieve through discipline and practice alone. To open the frequency, to clear the static, to restore your brain's access to the states in which you are most fully yourself, most fully connected, and most fully capable of receiving and acting on what God placed in you before you were born. 7 minutes. That is all it requires. Not an hour of silence you cannot find in your schedule. Not a retreat you cannot afford. Not a discipline that requires years of practice before it produces results. 7 minutes of listening, with headphones or speakers, to an audio track engineered with the precision of decades of neuroscience, and your brain begins to do what it was always designed to do. It begins to remember the frequency. It begins to clear the noise. It begins to access theta and gamma in a way that opens perception, sharpens clarity, deepens creativity, and creates the internal conditions in which everything else in your life, your relationships, your work, your spiritual sensitivity, your ability to hear and respond to divine signal, begins to function at a higher level. And before I tell you about the people whose lives this tool has already changed, I want you to hold one number in your mind. Over 19,000 people have now used the Genius Wave. 19,000 chosen ones who were sitting exactly where you are sitting right now, carrying the same questions, the same sense of something larger pressing against the inside of their chest, the same exhaustion from operating at a fraction of the clarity they knew they were built for. And of those 19,000, fewer than 4 in every 100 asked for their money back. That is not a marketing statistic. That is a testimony. That is 19,000 people saying yes, and fewer than 4 out of every 100 of them saying it did not work. The numbers do not lie about what this tool does in a life that is ready to receive it. But numbers are one language and stories are another, and chosen ones tend to hear stories more clearly. So let me tell you about a woman named Sarah, a 43-year-old teacher who had spent years feeling mentally foggy, creatively dry, and spiritually disconnected from the sense of purpose she knew was supposed to be driving her work. She had not lost her faith. She had lost her clarity. And without clarity, even the strongest faith can feel like trying to navigate a familiar room in complete darkness. She began using the Genius Wave for 7 minutes each morning before her students arrived, not with great expectation, just with the quiet willingness of someone who had decided that doing nothing was no longer an option. Within 3 weeks, something shifted. Solutions to problems she had carried for months began arriving with an ease that surprised her. Her students noticed before she did. She described it as feeling mentally present in her own life for the first time in years. And then there is David, a 47-year-old contractor who had spent 2 years working harder than he had ever worked and producing less than he had ever produced. The effort was not the problem. The frequency was. He was pushing with everything he had against a static that his effort alone could not clear. 6 weeks after beginning the program, he had closed 3 new contracts, restructured his entire approach to his business, and told the people closest to him that it felt as though someone had turned the lights back on inside his mind. Not new lights. The same lights that had always been there, restored to the brightness they were designed to carry. These are not exceptional cases pulled from the top 1% of results to make the program look better than it is. These are representative. Whys are what happens at the intersection of a chosen one who is ready and a tool that was built for exactly this moment in exactly this generation. Now, there is something I want to say to the part of you that is listening carefully and already doing the mental math. I know what some of you are thinking right now. $39 is not nothing, especially when you are in a season where every dollar carries weight, where you have already invested in things that promised transformation and delivered disappointment, where your trust has been stretched thin by the gap between what the world offers and what it actually delivers. That thought is valid. That caution is earned. And I am not here to dismiss it or talk over it. What I am here to say is this. The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49, which already represents extraordinary value for a tool built on 30 years of neuroscientific research. But through the link in the pinned comment and the description below, you can access it today for just $39. And every single purchase is backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to experience what this tool does in your life. And if at the end of those 90 days you do not feel that your clarity, your focus, your creativity, and your inner life have been genuinely and measurably transformed, you receive every dollar back without question and without complication. There is no risk in the financial sense. The only risk is continuing to operate below the frequency you were created to carry. Continuing to live with the static when the signal is available. Continuing to do everything else right. while the most fundamental tool in your neurological toolkit remains dormant for lack of 7 minutes a day and $39 of investment in the mind God gave you. One more thing, and this matters. There are imitation products circulating online that use similar language but do not contain the precise engineering that makes the genius wave what it is. The brainwave entrainment protocols used in this program are specific, calibrated, and proprietary. A substitute is not a substitute. It is simply something that sounds similar and delivers nothing that was promised. The only legitimate access point for the authentic Genius Wave program is the link in the pinned comment and the video description. That is the only place. If you find it anywhere else, at any price, it is not the real thing. Protect your investment by purchasing only through that single verified link. This offer, at the price of $39, is not permanent. The standard price returns when this limited window closes, and the number of purchases available at this rate is finite. This is not a pressure tactic. It is simply the reality of how the program is being made available at this stage, and it would be a disservice to you not to name it clearly. The window is open now. The frequency is available now. And everything that Moses discovered on the backside of the desert, that the preparation was not punishment, that the wilderness was building something extraordinary, that the burning bush was always coming, and the assignment was always real. All of it is pointing to this moment and asking you what you are going to do with it. Your brain was created to carry the frequency of a chosen one. Today, you can give it the tool it needs to remember how. And here is what makes this moment different. From every other moment, you have sat with an opportunity and let it pass. Every previous time, you were not yet fully awake to what was at stake. Every previous time, you had not yet heard the full story of what God was doing in the wilderness seasons, what He was building in the silence, what He was preparing in the years that looked like nothing. But you have heard it now, and hearing changes responsibility. Moses could not return to the palace after the burning bush and pretend he had not seen the fire. You cannot return to the ordinary static of your daily life and pretend you have not heard this frequency named, described, and made available to you in a form you can access before this day is over. The link is in the pinned comment. It is in the description below this video. One click. $39. 90 days to know with certainty whether this is real. And the science says it is. The 30 years of research say it is. The 19,000 people who have already made this investment and the fewer than 4 in every 100 who asked for their money back say it is. The only remaining question is whether you will turn aside, the way Moses turned aside at the burning bush, and give the signal the attention it deserves. You were not built for the static. You were built for the frequency. And everything God placed in you before the foundations of the earth, every gift, every dream, every impulse toward purpose that has followed you through every season of your life, is waiting on the other side of 7 minutes a day. The door is open. The tool is ready. The only step left is yours. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a moment of profound clarity. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of confusion, but the silence of a person who has just received something so significant that the spirit requires a moment to absorb it fully before moving forward. If you are sitting in that silence right now, if something from the last section landed in a place deeper than your intellect, and you are still feeling the reverberations of it, I want you to honor that. Do not rush past it. Do not immediately reach for your phone or fill the space with noise. The clarity you just received is not a sales pitch that ends when the offer is stated. It is a piece of a larger picture, and the picture is still being completed, one layer at a time, one revelation at a time, one section at a time, as this message continues to do what it was sent to do. Because what we were just exploring, the science of frequency, the neuroscience of theta and gamma, the extraordinary tool that Dr. Rivers spent 30 years building, is not separate from the spiritual journey you have been on since this message began. It is part of the same story. It is evidence of the same truth. God does not create a calling and then withhold every practical resource required to walk it out. He prepares the assignment, and then he prepares the person, and the preparation includes not just the spiritual formation of the wilderness seasons, not just the identity established at the burning bush, but also the practical tools and resources that allow the chosen one to function at the level the assignment demands. Heaven is not opposed to tools. Heaven uses them. Moses carried a staff, an ordinary shepherd's staff, a tool he had used for 40 years of wilderness life, weathered and worn, and completely unremarkable by any external measure. But in the hands of a chosen one walking in the fullness of their assignment, that staff became the instrument through which the Red Sea parted, through which water came from a rock, through which the signs and wonders that defined one of the most extraordinary chapters in all of human history were made manifest. The tool did not create the miracle. The anointing on the life of the person holding the tool created the miracle. But the tool was still necessary. God still told Moses to stretch it out. God still worked through the physical object in the hands of the surrendered person. You are the chosen one. The frequency is the staff. And what God does through a mind that has been restored to its full neurological potential, through a spirit that is operating in clarity rather than static, through a life that has removed the interference between the signal. Heaven is broadcasting, and the receiver you were designed to be, that is where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, where the daily becomes the miraculous, where 7 minutes of intentional practice becomes the hinge on which an entire season of breakthrough swings open. But before we go further into what that breakthrough looks like in your specific life and your specific season, I want to sit with you for a moment in the place where Moses found himself after the burning bush encounter was over. Because the revelation was real, and the assignment was clear, and the presence of God had been undeniable. And yet Moses still had to walk back down the mountain, still had to return to the ordinary world, still had to go back to Jethro's tent and figure out how to explain that everything had just changed. The encounter does not remove you from your life, it reorients you within it. The burning bush does not teleport you to Egypt. You still have to walk there one step at a time, in real time, through real terrain, carrying the staff that looks exactly the same as it did before God touched it. This is the part that chosen ones sometimes struggle with. The gap between the moment of revelation and the moment of visible manifestation. The distance between the burning bush and the parting of the Red Sea. That gap is not a sign that the encounter was not real. It is not evidence that you misheard or misunderstood, or that God has changed his mind. It is simply the terrain that exists between calling and completion, and every chosen one who has ever walked this earth has had to cross it. The gap is where faith is not just believed but practiced. It is where the chosen one discovers whether they trust the voice of God more than they trust the evidence of their current circumstances. Moses crossed that gap. He went back to Jethro. He asked permission to return to Egypt. He packed his family and his staff, and he started walking toward the most daunting assignment any human being had ever been given. And he did it without a visible army, without a political position, without anything the world would recognize as the tools necessary to confront an empire. He had a staff, a brother, and the word of a God who had introduced himself from a burning bush, and that was enough. Not because Moses felt it was enough, but because God said it was enough, and somewhere in the deepest part of himself, Moses decided to believe it. What has God told you is enough that you have been quietly doubting? What has He placed in your hands that you have been looking at and thinking, this cannot possibly be sufficient for what is being asked of me? The staff looked insufficient. The 7 minutes looks insufficient. The seed you are holding looks insufficient for the harvest that has been promised. But the kingdom of God has always operated on the principle that what is placed in surrendered hands is always exactly enough for the assignment it is being used to fulfill. Not one resource short, not one tool missing. Everything required is already in your possession, and the ones you do not yet hold are already on their way. The book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 19, speaks directly into this place. And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of His glory in Christ Jesus. Not some of your needs, not the needs He considers spiritually appropriate. All of them, every resource, every tool, every open door, every connection, every piece of clarity, every breakthrough in your neurological capacity to think and create and perceive and receive, all of it covered by a promise that does not fluctuate with the economy, or with your performance, or with the opinions of people who cannot see what God has placed on your life. Moses was walking toward Egypt with a staff and a promise, and that was the totality of his visible resources. And yet the impact of what was about to unfold through his obedience would echo across thousands of years of human history, would reshape the identity of an entire nation, would write itself into sacred text that billions of people would read and be transformed by long after Moses himself had returned to the dust. You cannot measure the impact of a surrendered yes. You cannot calculate the reach of a life that is fully aligned with its divine assignment. The math of heaven does not follow the formulas of earth. And here is what I want you to hold on to as we move into the next movement of this message. The fourth time God spoke to you, through the science, through the frequency, through the specific tool that bridges the spiritual sensitivity you carry with the neurological infrastructure that allows it to function at its fullest capacity, that was not a detour from the spiritual journey. That was the spiritual journey, wearing a different coat. The God who spoke from the burning bush is the same God who designed the human brain with the capacity for theta and gamma states. The God who equipped Moses with a staff is the same God who placed 30 years of neuroscientific research in the hands of a man like Dr. Rivers, so that a tool could exist in this generation that helps ones cut through the static and access the signal they were always designed to carry. There is no division in God's provision. There is no hierarchy where the supernatural is real and the practical is a suspect. The burning bush was supernatural, and it was also physical. The Red Sea parted through a miracle, and Moses still had to stretch out the staff. The manna came from heaven, and the people still had to go out each morning and gather it. Divine provision almost always requires human participation, and the form of that participation is never beneath the dignity of the one being called. Moses picked up manna from the ground. You can press play on a 7-minute audio track. Neither action is too small for the miracle it participates in. As this fifth encounter continues to unfold, as the layers of what God has been doing in your life become more visible with each passing section, I want you to remain in the posture of Moses at the mountain, not the posture of the man who said, "Who am I?" consumed by self-doubt and inadequacy, but the posture of the man who heard the answer to that question and decided it was enough. The posture of a chosen one who has received the signal, acknowledged the assignment, picked up the staff, and started walking. Not because every question is answered, not because every fear is resolved, but because the voice that spoke from the fire is trustworthy, and the fire is still burning, and you are still standing close enough to feel its warmth. The fourth time God spoke, He gave you language for something you have been experiencing your whole life. He gave you science to confirm what your spirit already knew. He gave you a tool and a doorway and a 90-day window of no-risk discovery. And now, as we move forward together, He is about to show you what it looks like when a chosen one stops standing at the edge of their calling and starts walking fully into it. Not someday, not when the conditions are more favorable, not when the doubt is smaller, or the clarity is greater, or the circumstances are more aligned. Now, in this season, with everything you currently have and everything that is currently on your life. The gap between the burning bush and the parting of the Red Sea was crossed one step at a time. And the next step for you is closer than the horizon. It is right here. It is right now. And the one who has been speaking to you through every signal, every redirect, every wilderness morning, and every burning bush moment is still speaking. You only need to keep listening. And the listening is not passive. It is not the listening of someone who sits and waits for the world to rearrange itself around their comfort. It is the listening of Moses on the mountain, active, attentive, fully present to what is being said, and fully willing to let it change the direction of everything. You have been that kind of listener today. You have stayed. You have turned side. You have given this signal the weight it deserves instead of scrolling past it into the noise of everything else competing for your attention. That choice matters. Heaven notices that choice. And what is coming in the sections ahead is built on the foundation of what you have already received. Deeper, wider, more specific to the life you are actually living and the assignment that is actually waiting. Stay with this. The best of what God has prepared for this moment is still ahead. There is a moment in every chosen one's journey where the calling stops being something they carry privately and starts becoming something they carry openly, where the assignment moves from the interior landscape of dreams and spiritual sensitivity and quiet knowing into the visible, shared, communal space of a life being lived out loud in front of others. Moses experienced this moment when he walked back into Egypt, not with fanfare, not with an army, not with any of the external markers that the world associates with authority and influence, but simply with his staff and his brother and the word of a God who had spoken from a fire. He stepped out of the private wilderness and into the public assignment. And in doing so, he crossed a threshold that every chosen one must eventually cross. The threshold between receiving the call and answering it in a way that other people can see. You have been in a private season, perhaps for longer than feels comfortable to admit. A season of interior formation, of spiritual searching, of sitting with questions that did not have easy answers, and carrying a sense of purpose that you could not yet fully articulate or demonstrate to the people around you. That season was necessary. It was the wilderness. It was the burning bush. It was the long corridor of preparation that every chosen one must walk before they are ready for the open field of their assignment. But there comes a point where the preparation is sufficient, where the vessel has been shaped enough to begin carrying what it was built to carry, where the chosen one is being invited not to receive more privately, but to begin giving more openly. And giving openly does not require a stage or a platform or a title or a position that the world would recognize as significant. Moses gave openly with a staff and a word. The widow in the temple gave openly with 2 small coins. The boy on the hillside gave openly with 5 loaves and 2 fish. What you give when you step into the open expression of your calling does not need to impress anyone. It simply needs to be genuine. It needs to be offered, and it needs to be released from the grip of the fear that says it is not enough. This message that you are receiving right now exists because someone chose to give openly. Someone chose to step out of the private comfort of their own spiritual experience and say, "What I have received is not meant only for me. What I have been given in the quiet is meant to be spoken in the open. What God has shown me in the wilderness is meant to be shared with the people who are still in theirs." That choice, the choice to give what you have been given, is the choice that transforms a personal encounter into a communal movement that turns one burning bush moment into a signal that reaches across distances and finds the people who need it most. If this message has reached you, if these words have found you in whatever moment and whatever circumstances brought you here today, then you are part of something that is moving in a direction larger than any single voice can carry alone. And I want to ask you something directly, not as a transaction, not as a demand, but as one chosen one speaking to another. If what you have received today has been real, if something in you has been stirred, awakened, confirmed, or comforted by what God has been speaking through this message, would you carry it further? Would you be willing to be the reason someone else receives it? It costs nothing to share this video. It takes less than 10 seconds to pass it along to someone whose name just appeared in your mind as these words were spoken. And I want you to pay attention to that name because it did not appear by accident. The chosen one who just came to mind, the person whose face you are seeing right now, the friend or family member or colleague or stranger whose situation you suddenly thought of, they are not a coincidence. They are a divine appointment dressed in a casual thought. Heaven is using your network to extend the reach of this signal, and all it requires from you is the willingness to forward what you received. If this channel has been a consistent source of spiritual nourishment for you, if you return here because something in what is spoken resonates with something in your spirit that does not find resonance easily in other places, then I want to invite you to subscribe if you have not already done so. Not because a number on a screen matters in the economy of heaven, but because subscribing means you will not miss the next message. And the next message may be the one that carries the specific word for the specific moment you will be standing in when it arrives. The chosen one stays connected to the flow of anointing. They do not drift in and out based on convenience. They position themselves consistently in the place where the signal is strong because they have learned through experience that the message they almost skipped was often the one they needed most. And if you have been blessed by what happens in this space, if the investment of time and prayer and preparation that goes into each message has produced fruit in your life, there is a donate link in the description below and in the pinned comment. Not an obligation, not a requirement for continued access to anything here. Simply an open door for those who feel led to sow into the mission, to participate in the practical work of keeping this signal broadcasting, of ensuring that the next chosen one who is scrolling in a moment of desperation finds something here that stops them and speaks directly to what they are carrying. Every contribution, regardless of size, is an act of partnership in something that belongs to God and is being offered in His name. Now, here is what I want you to understand about why this matters beyond the practical. Moses did not deliver Israel alone. He had Aaron who spoke when Moses felt his words were insufficient. He had Miriam who led the celebration when the Red Sea closed behind them. He had Joshua who would eventually carry the assignment forward when Moses' part of the journey was complete. The chosen one is never called to isolation. The assignment is always communal, always relational, always requiring the participation of more than one voice, more than one pair of hands, more than one person who decide to turn aside and see the burning bush and say yes to the weight of what it revealed. When you share this message, you are being Aaron. You are being the voice that reaches someone who needs to hear this in a different way, through your recommendation, through your relationship with them, through the trust that exists between you and the person whose name appeared in your mind a few moments ago. When you subscribe and return consistently, you are positioning yourself as part of a community of chosen ones who are doing the serious and sacred work of staying awake in a world that is desperate to keep everyone asleep. When you give through the donate link, you are being the widow with the 2 coins, the boy with the loaves, the person who offered what they had without calculating whether it was impressive enough to matter. And all of it, the share, the like, the subscription, the gift, all of it participates in the same movement that Moses stepped into when he walked back into Egypt with nothing but a staff and a word. The movement of chosen ones who have received something real and decided that keeping it to themselves was not an option. The movement of people who have been in the wilderness long enough to know what the wilderness feels like, and who cannot in good conscience stay silent when they find a message that could reach someone still wandering in theirs. There is someone watching this right now who found it because a chosen one they trusted shared it without explanation. Just sent the link and said, "Watch this. I think this is for you." And that simple act, that 10-second decision, changed the trajectory of what was about to happen in that person's life. You could be that chosen one for someone else today. The decision is as simple as the act, and the impact is as enormous as everything God chooses to do with a surrendered moment of generosity. The chosen ones who have gone before us understood something about the relationship between giving and receiving that the world has largely forgotten. You do not give after you have been blessed in order to qualify for more blessing. You give because giving is the nature of the one who called you. You give because you were designed in the image of a God who so loved the world that he gave. And that image in you is most fully expressed when you are most fully in the posture of giving. The chosen, one who hoards what they have received, who consumes the signal without passing it along, who takes from the well without ever contributing to it. That chosen one is living below the level of their assignment, not condemned, not disqualified, but below. Moses gave everything: his comfort in Midian, his anonymity, his carefully rebuilt sense of self that he had constructed over 40 years in the wilderness. He laid it all down and walked into the assignment with open hands, and those open hands were the precise condition required for God to work through them in the extraordinary ways that followed. Open hands receive. Open hands release. Open hands are the posture of a chosen one who has understood that nothing they carry was ever truly theirs to keep. So, like this video if it has spoken to you, because that small act of acknowledgement tells heaven and tells this community that the signal landed, that the frequency was received, that the message did what it was sent to do. Share it, because someone in your life is in a wilderness right now and does not know that a burning moment is available to them if they will only turn aside long enough to see it. Subscribe because you are not done receiving, and neither is God done speaking, and the next word is already being prepared for the next moment you will need it most. And if you feel led to give into this mission, the donate link is waiting for you in the description below and in the pinned comment. Open and without pressure, simply an invitation for those who feel that what happens in this space is worth sowing into. Every seed planted here goes directly into ensuring that the next chosen one who arrives at this channel in their darkest hour finds exactly what they need waiting for them. You are not a passive recipient of this signal. You are a carrier of it. And carriers do not stand still. They move, they share, they open their hands and release what they have been given, so that what God intended to reach many is not stopped at one. The wilderness shaped Moses for the mission. The mission required more than Moses. And everything that is building in you right now, every stirring, every recognition, every moment of clarity that has arrived through this message is not the end of something. It is the beginning of what happens when a chosen one steps out of the private season and starts living the assignment out loud. There is something that chosen ones carry that the people closest to them often cannot see, and the invisibility of it is one of the most quietly painful parts of walking in a calling that has not yet fully manifested in the visible world. It is not arrogance to know that you were built for something significant. It is not delusion to feel the weight of an assignment pressing against the inside of your chest on ordinary Tuesday mornings, when nothing around you looks like destiny and everything around you looks like the same routine it looked like yesterday. That weight is real. That knowing is real. And the fact that the people in your immediate circle cannot always perceive it, cannot always validate it, cannot always see what you see when you look at your own life through the lens of what you believe God has said about it, that is not evidence that you imagined it. That is evidence that you are carrying something that requires a different kind of sight to perceive. Moses carried this invisibility for 40 years in the wilderness. The people of Midian who knew him as Jethro's son-in-law, as the shepherd who moved the flocks through familiar terrain, as the quiet foreigner who had integrated into the rhythms of their community, none of them could see what was on his life. None of them looked at the man tending sheep on the backside of the desert and thought, "There goes the deliverer of nations. There goes the man who will stand before Pharaoh and demand the release of an entire enslaved people. There goes the vessel through whom God will part a sea and write his law in stone and establish a covenant that will echo across millennia." They saw a shepherd. Heaven saw an assignment, and the distance between those two perceptions was not a problem to be solved. It was simply the reality of a chosen one in a season of concealment. Concealment is not rejection. This is one of the most important things a chosen one must learn, and it is one of the hardest, because the feelings that accompany concealment are so easily confused with the feelings that accompany abandonment. When your gifts are not being recognized, when your calling is not being celebrated, when the people around you seem genuinely unbothered by the extraordinary thing that God has placed inside you, it is natural for the mind to begin constructing a narrative of rejection, to begin asking whether the calling was real, whether the signals were genuine, whether the burning bush encounter was something you experienced or something you manufactured in the desperate hope of a significance that was never truly yours. But the narrative of rejection is a lie that the enemy tells specifically to chosen ones in seasons of concealment, because it is in those seasons that the deepest roots are forming. A tree that is going to stand tall enough and strong enough and long enough to provide shade for generations cannot rush its root system. The roots must go down before the branches can go up, and the going down is invisible. It happens beneath the surface. It happens in the dark. It happens in the quiet of a season that looks from the outside like nothing is happening, when in reality, the most critical work of the entire life cycle is being done in the place no eye can see. You have been putting down roots. The wilderness years, the concealment seasons, the long stretches of time when your calling felt real but your circumstances offered no confirmation of it. Those were not empty years. Those were root years, and the depth of the root system that has been developing in you through every hard season, through every prayer that felt unanswered, through every door that did not open, and every room that did not have a place for you. That depth is the measure of what you will be able to carry when the season of manifestation arrives. Shallow roots cannot support a significant assignment. Deep roots can support anything. Moses came out of his concealment season, carrying something that 40 years of palace life never could have produced in him. He carried humility so deep it was almost a liability. The man who had been raised as Egyptian royalty, who had been educated in the most sophisticated intellectual environment of the ancient world, who had every natural advantage that birth and circumstance could provide, came out of the wilderness describing himself as slow of speech and slow of tongue, not as a performance of false modesty, as a genuine assessment of how he felt in relation to the weight of what was being asked. And God used that humility as the precise foundation on which to build one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of divine power in all of human history. Because a man who is full of himself has no room for God. A man who is empty of self-confidence but full of surrender is a vessel with infinite capacity. The book of 1 Peter, chapter 5, verse 6, carries this principle in words that land with the weight of lived experience. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. Due time, not your time, not the timeline you constructed based on how long you thought the preparation should take, not the schedule that would have made logical sense given the urgency of the assignment and the years already invested in the waiting. Due time, God's time. The time that is calibrated not to your comfort or your impatience, but to the precise moment when the exaltation will accomplish exactly what it was designed to accomplish. When the visibility of your assignment will serve the maximum number of people. When your emergence from concealment will be recognized not just as your breakthrough, but as a signal to others in one still in their wilderness, that the waiting was worth it and the promise was real. The invisible weight that you carry, the spiritual sensitivity that makes you perceptive in ways others are not, the deep empathy that feels like a burden in the wrong seasons and like a superpower in the right ones, the creative impulse that rises in you and has nowhere to go in the current season, the prophetic awareness of things that have not yet happened but that you sense are coming with a certainty you cannot fully explain. All of this is the content of your assignment. All of it is what God has been developing and protecting and concealing in you during the years that looked like nothing. The world teaches you to display everything, to perform your gifts for an audience, to build your platform while you build your character, as though the two were separate projects of equal priority. But heaven teaches the opposite. Heaven says, let the character go deep before the platform goes wide. Let the roots establish before the branches extend. Let the vessel be formed completely before it is filled publicly, because a vessel that is displayed before it is formed will crack under the weight of what it was built to carry, and the crack will not only be a personal catastrophe, but a public one, visible to everyone who was watching and waiting for evidence that the calling was real. God is protecting you in the concealment. God is protecting not just you, but the people who will be served by your assignment when it fully emerges. The man who was not ready to lead became Moses only after 40 years of a wilderness that made him ready. The assignment was always enormous. The preparation had to match it. And if you are still in a season of concealment, If you are in the place where what you carry is invisible to the people around you and the circumstances of your life do not yet reflect the magnitude of what you believe you were called to, then the preparation is not finished. And unfinished preparation is not failure. It is faithfulness. It is the faithfulness of a God who loves you enough to take the time to build you correctly instead of quickly. There is also something specific about the weight that chosen ones carry that goes beyond personal gifting or calling. It is an intercessory weight, a sensitivity to the pain of others that goes so deep it sometimes feels like your own pain, a capacity for grief that extends beyond your personal experience and reaches into the suffering of people you have never met, a restlessness in your spirit when injustice is present, even when that injustice does not directly affect you. This is not anxiety. This is intercession. This is the mark of someone who was designed not just to live their own life, but to stand in the gap for others, to carry in prayer and in presence what others cannot carry for themselves. Moses carried this weight. He stood between God and the people of Israel in the wilderness and interceded with a passion so fierce that he told God he would rather be blotted out of the book of life himself than watch his people perish without a mediator. That is not a normal human response to conflict. That is the response of a chosen one who has internalized the assignment so completely that the line between their own well-being and the well-being of the people they were sent to serve has become beautifully and sacrificially blurred. If you have ever felt that kind of weight for someone else, if you have ever carried a burden in prayer for a person or a situation that was not yours by any logical definition of personal concern, if you have ever wept for a stranger or felt a sudden and unexplainable heaviness that lifted only when you prayed, you are not being oversensitive. You are functioning in your assignment. You are doing the invisible work that holds things together in the spiritual realm while the visible world goes about its business unaware of what is happening on its behalf. This invisible work matters more than you know. The chosen ones who pray in the middle of the night when no one is watching, who carry the weight of intercession without recognition or applause, who stand in the gap faithfully in the concealment season. These are the ones who will walk into the manifestation season with a depth of spiritual authority that cannot be manufactured by any shortcut. Because authority in the kingdom of God is always proportional to the depth of the surrender that preceded it. Moses spent 40 years in surrender before he walked in authority, and every moment of that surrender was building something in him that Pharaoh's entire army could not ultimately withstand. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not carrying an invisible weight for nothing. The weight is the assignment. The concealment is the formation. And the God who sees what no human eye can see is watching every moment of your faithfulness in the hidden place, storing it, honoring it, and preparing to release it into the visible world at exactly the moment it will have the greatest impact. The invisibility will not last forever. It is not designed to. It is a season, not a sentence, and seasons change. There is a war being waged against your specific life, and it has been waged since before you were born. Not a generalized, impersonal conflict that sweeps through humanity without discrimination, not the kind of broad spiritual turbulence that affects everyone equally and therefore means nothing particular about you, but a targeted, strategic, intentional campaign directed at the specific assignment that was written over your life before the foundations of the earth were laid. The resistance you have faced is not random. The setbacks that have accumulated in your story are not the result of bad luck or poor timing or the absence of divine favor. They are the result of a specific and calculated opposition to a specific and significant calling, and the fact that the opposition has been so persistent and so persistent self-sim, one of the clearest pieces of evidence that what God placed on your life is worth opposing. The enemy does not waste resources. This is something the chosen ones need to understand with clarity and without the kind of spiritual fear that paralyzes rather than informs. The adversary is not omniscient and not omnipresent and not omnipotent, but he is strategic. He does not deploy concentrated, sustained opposition against assignments that carry no weight, against lives that pose no threat to his agenda, against people whose calling would have no significant impact on the kingdom of God. If it were fully realized, he attacks what matters. He targets what threatens. He invests his energy in disrupting the lives of those whose full emergence would shift something significant in the spiritual landscape of their generation. And if you have faced the kind of opposition that has felt disproportionate to the ordinary circumstances of your life, if the warfare has felt personal in a way that goes beyond what logic can explain, that is not a sign that God has abandoned you. That is a sign that you are carrying something the enemy considers worth fighting against. Moses understood spiritual warfare in a way that did not have that name in his time, but was utterly real in its operation. From the moment he stepped back into Egypt, from the moment his yes to God's assignment became visible and public, the resistance intensified dramatically. Pharaoh hardened his heart not once but 10 times. Every breakthrough was followed by a new barrier. Every demonstration of divine power was met with a counter from the magicians of Egypt, who imitated the miracles just closely enough to create confusion and doubt in the minds of the people watching. The path from the burning bush to the parting of the Red Sea was not a smooth progression of victory after victory. It was a grinding, exhausting, faith-testing sequence of advances and apparent setbacks, of moments where the promise seemed to be coming apart at the seams, where the people Moses was leading turned on him in frustration and demanded to know why he had brought them out of Egypt only to die in the wilderness. And Moses did not have a neat answer in those moments. He did not have a perfectly packaged theological explanation for why the breakthrough had not yet come in the form the people expected. He had only the Word of God, and he kept returning to it, kept holding on to it, kept presenting it to heaven as the anchor of his obedience, even when the visible evidence suggested that the promise was not going to be kept. That is warfare, not the absence of struggle, but the refusal to surrender in the middle of it. Not the elimination of doubt, but the decision to act on faith even when doubt is present and loud and making extremely compelling arguments. The warfare against your life has been operating on several specific fronts, and I want to name them because named things lose some of their power over us. The first front is the warfare against your identity, the relentless campaign to convince you that you are not who God says you are, that the calling is not real, that the sense of destiny you carry is self-deception, that the burning bush moments were emotional experiences rather than genuine divine encounters. This warfare is patient and persistent, and it uses the most credible voices available to it, including your own internal voice in your weakest moments. The opinions of people whose approval you value, and the long stretches of time when nothing visible seems to confirm what you believe in the invisible. The second front is the warfare against your relationships. Chosen ones often experience a painful and confusing pattern of relational disruption, of connections that seemed solid suddenly fracturing, of people they trusted withdrawing without explanation, of isolation arriving precisely when the assignment requires community. This is not coincidence. The enemy understands that a chosen one in isolation is a chosen one who is easier to destabilize, easier to discourage, easier to convince that the calling was imagined. Isolation weakens the signal. Community amplifies it. And so the warfare against your relationships is warfare against your ability to stay connected to the frequency of your assignment. The third front is the warfare against your mind. The fog, the confusion, the inability to access the clarity that you know is somewhere inside you, but that keeps slipping away when you reach for it. The mental exhaustion that arrives not from overwork alone, but from the spiritual static generated by sustained opposition. The intrusive thoughts that arrive precisely when you are on the verge of a breakthrough, pulling your attention back to fear, back to lack, back to every piece of evidence that the promise is not going to be kept. This is not a psychological disorder. It is a spiritual strategy. And it is one of the reasons that restoring the neurological conditions for clarity, for theta and gamma access, for the kind of focused, creative, receptive mental state that cuts through static and returns you to signal, is not a luxury for chosen ones in this season. It is a necessity. The fourth front is the warfare against your timing. The delays that seem designed to arrive at exactly the most discouraging moments. The opportunities that appear and then evaporate. The doors that opens just enough to create hope and then close before you can walk through them. This kind of warfare is designed to produce a specific result in the chosen one, the gradual erosion of expectation, the slow settling into a diminished version of the promise, the quiet decision to stop fully, believing because the cost of continued hope in the face of continued delay has become too high to keep paying. But here is what the warfare cannot touch. Here is what every targeted campaign angst identity, your relationships, your mind, and your timing has been unable to reach, regardless of how long it has continued and how effective it has appeared. It cannot touch the call itself. It cannot touch the covenant. It cannot reach the place where God wrote your name before the foundations of the earth. It cannot unmake what heaven made. It cannot cancel what God confirmed. It cannot reach into the eternal record and remove what was placed there before time began. The warfare is real, and it is targeted, and it is personal, and it is also ultimately powerless against the one thing that matters most, the unbreakable covenant between the God who called you and the chosen one he called. The book of Isaiah, chapter 54, verse 17, carries this truth with the authority of a divine decree. No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and this is their vindication from me, declares the Lord. No weapon, not the weapon of delay, not the weapon of relational disruption, not the weapon of mental fog or identity confusion, or the accumulated weight of setbacks that were designed to convince you that the calling was not real. No weapon formed against you will prosper. Not one, not ever. Not in this season, and not in any season that follows. The heritage of the chosen one is not the absence of warfare. It is the guaranteed outcome of every battle. You do not fight toward an uncertain result. You fight from a settled victory toward its visible manifestation in your circumstances. Moses faced warfare that would have broken anyone who was not anchored in a covenant stronger than the opposition. He faced it from Pharaoh, from the people he was leading, from his own moments of doubt and exhaustion, from the wilderness itself and its relentless capacity to produce discouragement in even the most faithful heart. And he came through it not because he was the strongest man in the desert, but because the God who sent him was stronger than everything that opposed him. That is your testimony too, chosen one. Not that you are stronger than the warfare, but that the one who called you is. So right now, in this moment, if you feel the weight of the battle you have been in, if you feel the exhaustion of sustained opposition and the weariness of a fight that has gone on longer than you thought you could endure, I want you to type these 4 words in the comments below. I will not quit. Not as a performance for anyone watching, as a declaration in the spiritual realm, as a stake driven into the ground of your own faith that says, regardless of what the warfare looks like today, regardless of what the enemy has thrown against this calling, I am still here, I am still standing, I am still holding the staff, and I am not turning back. Type it now. I will not quit. And let those words be the sound of a chosen one who has looked at everything the enemy has deployed against their life and decided that the covenant is stronger than the conflict, that the promise is louder than the opposition, and that the God who spoke from the burning bush has never once lost a battle he chose to enter. The warfare confirms the calling, and the calling is still on. There is a moment that comes in every chosen one's journey that does not announce itself with trumpets or with the kind of dramatic spiritual electricity that you might expect from a turning point of such significance. It arrives quietly. It arrives in the middle of an ordinary moment, in the space between one breath and the next, in the stillness that follows a long season of noise. It arrives not as a thunderclap, but as a settling, a deep interior quieting, a sense that something that has been held in tension for a very long time is finally, gently being released. It is the moment when the chosen one stops striving and starts surrendering, stops trying to make the promise happen and starts trusting the one who made it, stops measuring the distance between where they are and where they were told they would be, and starts simply being present to what God is doing right now in the ground beneath their feet. Moses experienced this moment at the edge of the Red Sea, not at the burning bush, not in the palace, not in any of the dramatic confrontations with Pharaoh that had preceded this moment, but here at the water's edge, with an army behind him and an impassable body of water in front of him, and 2 million people looking to him for an answer he did not have in any natural sense. This was the moment of complete surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, not the surrender of a man who has run out of options and is simply giving up, but the surrender of a man who has finally, completely, run out of himself and is standing in the precise place where God does his most extraordinary work, the place of utter human impossibility. And what did Moses do at the edge of the Red Sea? He did not strategize. He did not call a meeting. He did not reach for the contingency plan that his palace education might have suggested. He lifted the staff. He stretched out his hand over the water. He did the thing God told him to do. In the moment, God told him to do it, with no visible evidence that it would work, with no preview of what was about to happen, with nothing but the word of a God who had never once failed to be exactly who he said he was. And the sea parted, not because Moses was impressive, because the God who sent him was faithful. You are standing at your Red Sea. I want you to hear that not as a metaphor, but as a literal description of where you are in the timeline of your assignment. Everything that has preceded this moment, every wilderness year, every burning bush encounter, every confrontation with Pharaoh, every plague, every demonstration of divine power that built your faith one impossible thing at a time, all of it has been moving you toward this edge, toward the place where what lies behind you can no longer be returned to, and what lies before you cannot be crossed in your own strength. This is not a bad place to be. This is the best place to be. This is the place where the chosen one discovers once and for all that the God who called them is not theoretical, not historical, not a comfort for weak moments, but a living, present, actively intervening reality who parts seas and moves mountains and makes ways where no way exists. The coronation that is coming for you is not a reward for perfect performance. Moses was not a perfect man. He lost his temper in the wilderness and struck the rock when God told him to speak to it, and that moment of self-reliance cost him the entrance into the promised land. He was not flawless, he was faithful, and faithfulness, not flawlessness, is the currency of the kingdom of God. The chosen one who makes it through to coronation is not the one who never stumbled, never doubted, never acted in their own strength when they should have waited for God's. It is the one who stumbled and got back up, who doubted and kept walking anyway, who acted in their own strength, and then repented and returned and allowed the failure to become a teacher rather than a tombstone. Your failures are not disqualifications. Let me say that again with the full weight it deserves. Your failures are not disqualifications. They are not evidence that the calling was misplaced or that God made an error in choosing you or that the enemy has won any permanent victory over your assignment. They are evidence that you are human, that the process of formation is ongoing, that there are still places in you where trust has not yet fully replaced control, where surrender has not yet fully replaced striving, and God is not surprised by any of it. He knew every stumble before you took your first step, and He built the path with enough grace to cover every one of them. The book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28 speaks into this reality with a comprehensiveness that leaves nothing out. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. All things, not the pleasant things, not the things that fit neatly into the narrative of divine favor that we would prefer to tell about our lives. All things, the failures and the delays, the detours and the wilderness seasons, the moments of self-reliance that produced consequences, the relationships that ended in pain, the opportunities that seemed to slip away, the years that felt wasted, and the prayers that seemed to go unanswered, all of it being worked actively, continuously, by a God who is not reactive but purposeful, not scrambling to redeem your mistakes, but sovereignly weaving even the threads of human failure into a tapestry that will ultimately display His glory and your restoration in equal measure. This is the truth that the enemy does not want you to settle into, because a chosen one who is fully convinced that God is working all things together for their good is a chosen one who cannot be destabilized by circumstances, cannot be shaken by delay, cannot be defeated by the appearance of failure, cannot be convinced to quit by the weight of opposition, no matter how heavy or how long sustained. The settled chosen one, the one who has stopped waiting for circumstances to confirm what God already declared, is the most dangerous person the enemy faces, because their faith does not depend on what they can see, their peace does not depend on what they can control, and their forward movement does not depend on the cooperation of anything or anyone that God has not already accounted for in the plan. Moses led a nation to the edge of the promised land. He saw it from a distance. He did not enter it, and that was a consequence of a specific act of disobedience. But even that was not the final word on his legacy, because thousands of years later, on the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses stood on holy ground again, this time in the company of Elijah and the Son of God Himself, His face shining with a glory that death had not diminished and time had not erased. The promised land was not his final destination. It was a chapter, and the chapter that followed it was more glorious than anything the land of Canaan could have contained. Your current chapter is not your final destination. The wilderness was not your final destination. The concealment season was not your final destination. The warfare, the setbacks, the delays, the moments of failure, and the long stretches of confusion. None of these are where your story ends. They are where your story is being written, with a pen held by a God who knows exactly where the final sentence is going, and who has never once written a story that ended in defeat for one of his chosen ones. The coronation is not a distant dream for a version of you that is better and stronger and more spiritually mature than the one you are right now. The coronation is for you as you are, in this season, carrying everything you currently carry, including the wounds and the questions and the unresolved tense of a journey that has been harder than you expected and longer than you planned. God does not wait for you to be finished before he begins to crown you. He crowns the willing. He crowns the surrendered. He crowns the ones who have stood at the edge of their Red Sea with nothing but a staff and a word, and chosen to lift the staff anyway. And the yes that is required of you in this moment is not a yes to perfection. It is not a yes to having everything figured out, or every doubt resolved, or every wound healed before you take the next step. It is simply the yes of Moses at the water's edge. The yes of someone who has looked at the impossible and decided that the God who called them into it is bigger than it. The yes that lifts the staff when lifting the staff makes no logical sense. The yes that says, I do not know how this is going to work, but I know who is working it, and that is enough for me to take the next step. The confusion of your current season is not the final chapter. It is the penultimate one. It is the chapter that makes the coronation make sense, that gives the breakthrough its context, that allows the people watching your life to understand why the emergence was worth waiting for, and why the assignment was worth all the years it required to produce the person capable of carrying it. The confusion is giving way, the clarity is coming, and the coronation, the full visible manifestation of everything God placed on your life before you were born, is closer than the confusion suggests. Moses saw the sea part. You will see yours part too. Not because you are worthy of it in any self-generated sense, but because the God who promised it does not break promises, does not abandon assignments, does not leave the chosen one standing at the water's edge without making a way. The way is being made right now, in the invisible, in the place where God works before the evidence arrives. And when the sea opens, when the way appears where no way was visible, when the moment of coronation comes in whatever form God has designed it to take in your specific life and your specific story, you will understand in an instant why every single day of the journey was necessary. Every wilderness morning, every burning bush encounter, every confrontation with Pharaoh, every moment of standing at the water with an army behind you and nowhere to go in your own strength. All of it was the corridor. All of it was the preparation. All of it was the long, faithful, sacred work of making a chosen one ready for a coronation that will not just change their life, but will send a signal to every other chosen one still in their wilderness that the promise is real, the call is genuine, and the God who spoke it has never once stopped being faithful. Your coronation is closer than the confusion suggests, and the staff is already in your hand. You have stayed. Through every section of this message, through every layer of revelation, through the story of Moses, from the palace to the wilderness, to the burning bush, to the edge of the Red Sea, you have stayed. And I want you to understand that the staying was not accidental. The staying was itself an act of obedience, a response to the fifth signal, the unskippable encounter that was always going to find you at exactly this moment, in exactly this season of your life. You did not stumble into this message. You were led here, and everything that has been spoken over you today, every word that landed in a place deeper than your intellect, every moment where something in your spirit said yes, That is me. That is my story. That is the thing I have been carrying without a name for longer than I can remember. All of it was intentional. All of it was prepared for you before you arrived. We began this journey with a bold and simple truth. You are not here by accident. You are chosen. You are marked. You are carrying an assignment that was written over your life before you drew your first breath, and the God who wrote it has been faithful to pursue you through every season of distance and doubt and delay, speaking 4 times before this moment, and now speaking a 5th time in a way that is undeniable and unskippable, and designed to land with the full weight of everything the previous 4 signals were building toward. And here, at the end of this message, I want to gather every thread that has been woven through this journey and hold them together for a moment before I release you into what comes next. You were marked before you could explain it. The signs were always there, the vivid dreams, the inexplicable pull towards something larger than your circumstances, the depth of feeling that set you apart, the path that refused to straighten into something ordinary no matter how hard you tried to normalize it. These were not personality quirks. They were divine fingerprints. The evidence of a God who was personally and intentionally involved in the formation of a person he had specific plans for. Plans that did not shrink in the face of your failures or your doubts or your wilderness seasons, but grew quietly in the concealment, putting down roots that would eventually support a weight that would have crushed a shallower vessel. Moses showed you what the looks like from the inside, not from the triumphant distance of historical retrospect, where the Red Sea parting and the tablets of stone and the 40 years of wilderness leadership all look like a coherent and majestic narrative, but from the messy, uncertain, often terrifying interior of a man who did not know how any of it was going to work out and said yes anyway. He showed you that the chosen one is not the one who has no fear, but the one who lifts the staff in spite of it. He showed you that the wilderness is not a detour from the assignment, but a non-negotiable part of the formation that makes the assignment possible. He showed you that the warfare is real and targeted and personal, and that it is also ultimately powerless against the covenant that covers the life of the one God has called. And he showed you that the coronation, the full visible manifestation of everything God placed on your life, is not reserved for the perfect. It is prepared for the surrendered. And now, at the end of this 5th encounter, at the place where the message has done everything it was sent to do, and the signal has been received and the frequency has been restored in you, in a way that no amount of noise can fully undo, I want to do something that feels as natural as breathing in this moment. I want to pray with you. Father, I come before you on behalf of every chosen one who has stayed through this message, every person who turned aside to see the burning bush of this encounter and found themselves standing on holy ground they did not expect to find today. You know each one of them by name. Not the name the world gave them, but the name you have always called them by. The name that corresponds to the assignment. The name written in the place no earthly record can touch. You know the wilderness they have been walking through. You know the warfare that has been waged against their specific calling. You know the Red Sea that is standing in front of them right now, impassable in every human calculation, already parted in every divine one. I ask you to confirm what you have been speaking. Let every word that was true land deeper than the mind and take root in the spirit. Let every false narrative of rejection and abandonment and disqualification be dissolved in the light of what you have declared over these lives before the foundations of the earth were laid. Let the clarity come. Let the frequency be restored. Let the static give way to the signal. Let the chosen ones who have been in concealment begin to feel the first movements of the season that follows it, the season of emergence, the season of manifestation, the season where the roots that went down in the dark begin to produce fruit that is visible to everyone who said it would never grow. Cover them in the wilderness that remains. Strengthen them in the warfare that continues. Remind them in the moments of doubt that the covenant is stronger than the conflict, that the promise is louder than the opposition, and that the God who spoke from the burning bush is the same God who is speaking right now through every word of this prayer and every breath they are taking in this moment. Bring them through to their coronation, not because they are flawless, but because you are faithful. Not because they earned it, but because you promised it. And a God who promises does not forget. In the name that is above every name, the name before which every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Amen. Chosen one, you have been seen today. You have been named. You have been reminded of what you carry and why it matters, and who put it there and what He intends to do with it. When the season of concealment gives way to the season of coronation that is already written in your future, and the God who pursued you through 4 signals before this one, who prepared this 5th encounter with the precision and the love of a father, who refuses to give up on the one He called, that God is not finished speaking. He is not finished working. He is not finished making a way in the places where no way is visible to human eyes. If this message has done what it was sent to do in you today, if something in you has been stirred and confirmed and awakened and restored, then carry it forward the way Moses carried the word from the burning bush back into the world that needed it. Share this video with the chosen one whose name has been sitting in the back of your mind since the first section, the one who is in their wilderness right now and does not know that the burning bush moment is closer than they think. Subscribe to this channel because the next word is already being prepared, and it may be the specific word for the specific moment you will be standing in when it arrives. And if you feel led to sow into this mission, to participate in the practical work of keeping this signal broadcasting to the chosen ones who have not yet found it, the donate link is in the description below and in the pinned comment, an open invitation with no pressure and no condition, simply a doorway for those who feel that what God is doing in this space is worth supporting with more than a click. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not carrying the weight of an assignment that God has reconsidered or a calling that time has made irrelevant. You are a chosen one, standing at the edge of your Red Sea, staff in hand, with an army behind you and a parted sea ahead of you and a God beside you who has never once lost a battle He chose to enter. The sea is parting. The coronation is coming. And the God who chose you before the foundations of the earth is the same God who will be standing with you when every promise He made over your life is finally and fully and visibly kept. You were chosen for this. You were built for this. And you were always meant to make it through.